What would you do if your entire life was built on a lie your parents told themselves? I was 24 when I learned the truth, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how I walked away from the people who raised me, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Growing up, I was the golden child in a house of secrets. My parents, Ellen and Mark, always spoke of Grandpa's wealth like it was a sacred promise. Grandpa Henry, my mother's father, was a quiet man who'd made a fortune in real estate. To my parents, his money was their ticket to a life of ease, and they lived as if it was already theirs. They bought a sprawling house, drove luxury cars, and threw lavish parties, all on borrowed money. They assumed I'd inherit Grandpa's millions and pay off their debts. I was their collateral, their future ATM. But they never asked me what I wanted. I adored Grandpa. He wasn't flashy like my parents. He lived in a modest cabin, surrounded by books and old vinyl records. When I was a kid, we'd spend hours fishing at the lake, him telling me stories of his youth, his struggles, his dreams. He taught me to value hard work, integrity, and independence. Clara, he'd say, money doesn't make you free. Only your choices do. I didn't understand then, but those words would become my lifeline. By the time I was in college, my parents' spending had spiraled. They'd taken out loans against the house, maxed out credit cards, and even borrowed from shady lenders. They'd whisper about Clara's inheritance like it was a done deal. I felt trapped, suffocated by their expectations. I wanted to be a writer, to carve my own path, but they laughed it off. You'll never need to work, Mom would say. Just wait for Grandpa's money. It made my skin crawl. Then came the day that changed everything. I was 22, home for Thanksgiving, when Grandpa called me to his cabin. He was frail, his eyes tired but sharp. He handed me a letter and said, "Read this after I'm gone." I begged him to tell me what it was, but he just smiled and squeezed my hand. 3 months later, he passed away. I was devastated, but I held on to that letter like a lifeline. When the will was read, my parents were there, practically salivating. But the lawyer's words hit like a thunderbolt. Grandpa had left his fortune to a charity for homeless youth. The cabin, a small trust fund, and his old pickup truck went to me. My parents got nothing. They screamed, cried, accused the lawyer of fraud. I sat there, numb, clutching the unopened letter. That night, alone in my dorm, I read it. Grandpa's words were a revelation. He'd known about my parents' recklessness, their greed. He'd seen how they pinned their hopes on me, how they tried to mold me into their safety net. Clara, he wrote, you are not their savior. You are your own person. Live your life, not theirs. Tears streamed down my face as I realized he'd given me something far greater than money, freedom. My parents didn't take it well. They called me ungrateful, selfish, a traitor. They demanded I sell the cabin to pay their debts. You owe us, Dad shouted. We raised you. But I saw them clearly for the first time. They hadn't raised me out of love. They'd raised me as an investment. Every sacrifice they'd made came with strings attached. I felt sick, betrayed, but Grandpa's words echoed in my mind. Only your choices make you free. So I made my choice. I cut them off. No calls, no visits, no money. I sold the truck to fund my move to a small apartment in the city. The trust fund was enough to cover rent while I worked part-time and wrote. My parents sent letters, voicemails, even showed up at my door, begging, threatening, guilt-tripping. But I held firm. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving myself. The first year was hard. I missed the idea of family, the warmth of what could have been. But I found peace in my tiny apartment, my words filling pages with stories I'd always wanted to tell. I got a job at a bookstore, surrounded by people who valued ideas over dollars. Slowly, I built a life that was mine. 2 years later, I heard through a cousin that my parents had lost the house. They'd moved into a cramped apartment, still dodging creditors. Part of me ached for them, but I knew I couldn't go back. They'd made their choices, just as I'd made mine. Now, at 26, I'm not rich, but I'm free. I walk through the park at dusk, my notebook in hand, dreaming up stories. Grandpa's cabin is still mine, a quiet retreat where I write on weekends. His letter sits on my desk, a reminder of the strength he saw in me. I don't hate my parents, but I don't owe them my life. Sometimes, love means letting go. Sometimes, freedom means walking away.